Commonwealth's attorneys and I have concluded that the NCAA sanctions were overreaching and unlawful.
Someone's got to develop a product that you and I as a consumer are going to want to buy.
Our country needs a comprehensive energy plan.
Hello and welcome to this edition of For the Record. Our guest today is Democratic candidate for governor, former Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection, Kathleen McGinty. Secretary McGinty, welcome to For the Record.
Thanks, it's terrific to be here.
A lot of people know you as the Secretary of DEP, but why don't you share a little bit about yourself that people don't know about you to get ready for the primary?
Sure. Well, I've had the privilege also of starting a small business, running a business, and most fun, working in the White House with President Clinton, and there ran an agency that oversaw a variety of different executive branch agencies that work on things like the environment, agriculture, international trade, and the environmental aspects of that. So it was a broad and diverse experience and a terrific opportunity for a kid from Northeast Philadelphia.
So what led you to decide to run for this office this year?
Well, listen, for me, my break in life as the 9th of 10 kids, the first to go to four-year college, was all about education. And when I see a governor, as Governor Corbett has done, step up and cut $1 billion out of public education, I know that means kids in this Commonwealth aren't going to get the chance to develop and discover their great talents. You know, you can't be in and around Penn State without knowing that education, our educational institutions are our crown jewels. We need to invest in them. I don't think it's unrelated or a coincidence that at the same time we cut education, we have fallen from 7th to 48th in job creation. So I'm in to turn all that around.
Now, one of the things that has been discussed about the $1 billion cut is the talk about that was stimulus money from the federal government as opposed to state money. Elaborate, if you would, on that.
Well, first, I do think it's funny when Governor Corbett brings that up because it's crocodile tears. He didn't support the stimulus to begin with. Having said that, the governor made some choices, right? Instead of realizing, look, he inherited a $1.4 billion revenue surplus. He could very well have put that to education. He decided to cut education instead. He also inherited a bipartisan consensus that we, like every other state in the union, should have a reasonable tax on the shale gas industry. He stood against that, I guess, loyal to Grover Norquist or Tea Party principles or something like that, and instead, again, decided to cut education. Those are decisions and choices the governor made. Now, I'd like to see him just own those choices, defend them. I find it indefensible. And I would invest in our kids, and I'd invest in school, and I'd invest in education.
With the talk about a severance tax on natural gas, the local impact fee versus the severance tax is one of the things that was discussed within the Harrisburg, but also the fact that capital stock and franchise and also corporate net income tax are higher than other states. What balance do you need to find to make sure that the taxes are level so that we're not going to cap wells and have people leave?
Well, there was an important report just issued by the Independent Financial Office of the legislature that said actually our impact fee is the least taxing, if you will, fee in the country, and sometimes by an order of 12 times less costly than, for example, West Virginia's. Having said that, I have designed the severance tax that I've proposed so that it is based on West Virginia's formula, but just less impactful. It's less costly, if you will, than West Virginia's, because I think everybody needs to pay their fair share, but I don't want to kill the industry. What I want to see is turn the numbers around. Under Governor Corbett, he came into office, 3 out of 4 jobs in the Marcellus went to Pennsylvanians. Now it's less than 1 in 2. That's not right. I want to grab those jobs for Pennsylvanians. Now this comes back to education too, because at the same time this industry was taking off, the governor also cut apprenticeship and job training programs. We need those welders, those pipe fitters, those folks who have skills in basic civil engineering so that we're not seeing Texas and Oklahoma license plates, but those jobs are going to our kids, and that's what I'd prioritize.
What is your percentage that, because there are other people in the race that want to do it at 10%, what's the number you want to go at in terms of a tax?
Well, let's talk about revenues.
Sure.
In the first year, my proposal would raise about $700 million of additional revenues. Now, we know $1 billion has been taken out of public education. One of the things I do is dedicate every penny to restoring those cuts. And I think that's critically important. One, our kids need and deserve that investment. But two, as you know, our seniors and our families are seeing property taxes go through the roof. Now, we can ease the pressure on property taxes when the state steps up to its responsibility to public education. So for both reasons, putting a lid on property taxes and also giving our kids the tools they need to succeed, I dedicate every penny to education.
One of the things that makes you stand out from other Democrats in the race, you were opposed to the platform where the Democrats wanted to stop all fracking. You were pro-energy, and has that raised some feathers within the Democratic Party because of your stance on that?
Well, no, listen, for 25 years, I've had the privilege of being on the hot seat on tough environmental issues and finding the way that you're responsible about the environment, but you create jobs as well. When I was secretary, I brought businesses from around the world to locate in our state, 3,000 new jobs and $1 billion in new investment. It's critically important that we not sacrifice our air, our water, but it's critically important too that we bring creativity so that we are creating jobs. One of the things I'd like to see in the Marcellus, after I put a tough environmental cop on the beat, is that we use that gas not just to burn it for energy, but as engineers at Penn State know, gas is carbon and hydrogen. You pull that apart and it is the feedstock to make almost any product under the sun, whether it's life sciences, biotech, pharmaceuticals, new materials. They're all based on that same feedstock. We should be competing and winning, bringing those high-paying industries to Pennsylvania.
What other avenues can they use the Marcellus Shale for? I know here locally, CATA, the buses all run on that. Can you find a way to sort of encourage mass transit to go to that natural gas?
Well, let's just talk about mass transit. It's such a vital investment. I was visiting yesterday in a rural area in Allegheny County and Cambria County, and in both cases, people volunteered to say to me that they don't own a car, they're lower wage worker, and that transportation, that mass transit option is critically important for them to be able to work. I see in the city of Philadelphia, where our headquarters, my campaign headquarters is, the young people that I've attracted to the campaign, you know, these are high-flying kids. They can go anywhere, they're talented, they're going to be high earners, but they want the mobility that comes with mass transit as well. So for me, what a good investment. Put our people to work building the mass transit options, but then enabling people both on the lower end of the income spectrum as well as these high-flyer young people who want mobility. That's what mass transit brings us, and it's a critically important investment.
That's a good stopping point for us. Back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. Our guest is candidate for governor, Kathleen McGinty. Secretary McGinty, I stopped you talking about natural gas and mass transit. One of the other things that Pennsylvania has a surplus of is coal. Yet it seems to be the dirty word in energy right now. You work in the energy field now. What can people do to get through the myths about it's not the coal of the 1800s?
Well, listen, every energy resource and every industrial activity needs to be produced or developed in a way where we're protecting our air, our land, our water. With coal, we also have to wrestle with the issue of climate change. And I do think that we should step forward with a comprehensive climate change plan. But here's what it would enable us to do. I don't usually think about things in terms of a lose-lose game.
Right.
It's a win-win game. We can vastly improve the efficiency of our economy and take on the climate issue as an initiative, not to shut things down necessarily, but to enable us to produce more economic product with less needed energy input than any other state in the country. What if we became a leader in energy efficient technologies, for example? What if we became a leader in those modifications and innovations around our capital plant and equipment that allows us to take on that climate issue while we grow economic opportunity? I think that would be a great challenge to engage our young people in as well. They'd come up with a lot of innovations.
The slogan for your website and your campaign, better jobs, better schools, better opportunities. let's talk about better schools, because we've touched on education a little bit. Where do you see the investment that needs to be made? And my follow-up will be then, how are you going to pay for it? So where do you think the most important area is in K through 12 or post? Where your thoughts?
Well, I do think it's critically important that we start early, and I have proposed universal pre-K. I had an interesting visit just the other day with a new organization of retired military officials. They've recently released a study that shows that 75% of young people 17 to 24 years of age in the United States would not be fit to serve in the military. They can't read. They are not healthy. The military is now taking on the issue of pre-K because they see what our failure to invest is doing to young people. So whether your issue is military readiness, whether your issue is as a mom or a dad, I think we can find common ground. That would be a key investment that I'd make. Second, I do think that simple things like the size of the classroom really matters. I don't know how a teacher can really have a prayer of teaching when there's 40 kids in a class, and I have proposed very significantly to bring that class size down. Third, I think we've got enormously talented young people, and I'd want to invest in science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math. Those things that really develop creative capability and potential.
Local school districts usually pay for most of education through property taxes. We've talked about that a little bit in the first segment. How do you alleviate the property tax, and also by making the local schools more involved? Because I've always heard that if Harrisburg pays more for your education, Harrisburg's going to be more involved in the education process. Give me your thoughts on that, if you will.
Well, let me take that last piece first, because it's something we haven't touched on. As a mom with 3 young girls in public school, I'm very concerned about what we're doing on the accountability side. We need accountability. We need to benchmark our progress. But one of my daughters will sit through 8 weeks of standardized tests this year, 2 full months out of the school year. To say nothing of all the prep time prepping for the test. I really would step back from all of that, from the ERBs and the PSSAs and the Keystones and now Common Core. I'd put it all on the table and bring moms and dads together, bring educators together to say, how can we achieve that assessment of how our children are doing without pulling the lifeblood out of our classrooms, sucking all the oxygen out. You know, my kids, within 2 weeks of coming back from summer break, were sitting for standardized tests. That's not a good way to go.
Why do you think educators have decided that standardized testing is the best way to measure a student's ideas as opposed to just grades and their ability to read, write, and do arithmetic?
Well, I think everybody realizes that that has to be part of the equation. And I think the initial impetus was the right one, to make sure that a child in Pittsburgh and a child in Pittston, you know, are all graduating with the same kinds of capabilities. And so you have to have some common yardstick, that's true. But I think that we've gotten excessive about it. And I think that we've gotten to a point where we're reducing our kids' ability to really learn in terms of critical thinking when we're chewing up so much class time in those standardized tests. The tests themselves, I think we're also realizing, are a poor measure of some capabilities. One of my kids, she struggles to read. She's making good progress, but what the teachers say, she's going to be successful. Why? She's got grit. The kid works really hard. We're all coming to see that that's part of seeing how a child is developing. Standardized test doesn't give you that, and I'd hate to see a child who maybe isn't a good tester, but has grit and imagination and goals be held back. So I think we need tools, but new and different and improved tools.
Governor Rendell discussed the idea of merging more school districts because there are so many. Do you agree with that idea? Because
Well,
you get pushback from the locals. I hate to cut you off, but local identity is the school district. You know, some counties are countywide, but others are here in Center County. We have 5 different school districts. So your thoughts on that?
Well, listen, I do think in some areas, you see where we have redundancy and duplication and excess costs, maybe some excess bureaucracy and red tape as well. In a related area, I've stepped forward and proposed 2 initiatives. One is with respect to local police jurisdictions. Right now, some very high percentage, I think it's in the almost 80% of the police jurisdictions in Pennsylvania have 10 or fewer full-time officers. There are some communities that are beginning to move to say maybe we could join forces, so to speak, with local adjoining communities. Right. And what I'd like to see in that instance, for example, invest the dollars in community policing, in having police that can actually walk the streets, get to know the neighbors, and maybe lighten it up in terms of the overhead and the leadership dollars and the bureaucracy at the top.
That's a great stopping point. Back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. We're speaking with Kathleen McGinty. Secretary McGinty, I cut you off because there are 2 areas that are important that we talked about, police and pensions. Police especially, you want to add more police to the streets. Great concept. However, it is expensive to put people on the streets. How do you propose paying for that?
Well, the initiative I've proposed is to increase by about 5%, to be about 1,000 officers across the Commonwealth. The boots that we have on the ground and those officers that can really come to know the community. I think there's great common ground, if you will, among various players in a community that type of policing is really effective and much needed. As I travel to various communities, I am concerned that we're seeing a resurgence of very serious drug-related problems, heroin, meth, really taking root again in our streets. And I think we need to get on that and spare young lives. That initiative, all in, is about $14 million. And I think in the context of a $29 billion budget, right. I'm just saying it would be a priority for me.
Are those state police or are they local police?
Those are local police.
Okay.
And some of the funding, by the way, would come from those police forces that might decide to consolidate at the bureaucratic level, again, with the idea that you lighten the overhead, you can afford more boots on the ground. But I do think that investing in those officers that can become part of the fabric of the community is critically important.
When we stopped in the last segment, we were talking about the idea of merging, and one of the things that makes it such an important thing is the pension crisis that is looming over Harrisburg, but also local cities and counties, because there are, like we talked about, 10 policemen in a group, and that is one retirement group as opposed to a statewide thing. What are your thoughts on how to best handle this huge crisis that's coming down on all of us in the Commonwealth?
You know, about 70% of the municipal pensions in Pennsylvania have fewer than 10 active members. What does that mean? It means we have really high transaction costs relative to the return that the taxpayer is getting. A number of those pensions as well are not performing very well. They're underfunded, they're not delivering the returns that are required. So I have proposed an initiative that would encourage municipalities to look to consolidate their pension plans. Many of them are managing 5 different and separate pensions that are completely incompatible. You know what it is. If you go someplace and you're going to buy more of something, the cost is typically less. They cut you a break. Mm-hmm. When you're taking 5 different tiny bites out of something, it's really expensive. So I have put incentives out there to enable that consolidation, and also for communities to look at the Pennsylvania-wide municipal retirement system, which has been delivering much better returns at a much more reduced cost than many of these municipalities are realizing today.
Let's talk about ethics reform. You came out this week talking about there's a need for that. Attorney General Kane has come under scrutiny by Representative Metcalf about a legislative sting that she inherited from the past administration. She stopped running on it. What do you see about the issues with ethics in Harrisburg?
Well, to me, 2 things are unacceptable. One, that it was at all allowable that representatives could take envelopes full of cash. But that apparently is what happened, and the outrage of it is it was perfectly lawful to take the cash. Now, it needed to be reported. But the second thing that I find outrageous and unacceptable is that the legislature's response to that is, well, the public doesn't like those fistfuls of cash now that they see it, so we will legislate against that. But if tomorrow I come up to you and I hand you a fistful of first-class tickets, all expenses paid to Hawaii, that's still going to be perfectly legitimate under Pennsylvania law. That's an outrage. We need an absolute, full, total, no asterisk, no footnote ban on gifts. These are legislators who get a perfectly very good pay. They get a per diem on top of that pay, and they have a budget on top of that for legitimate travel expenses and meals and that kind of thing. There's no room for a gift in politics.
You worked in the federal government as well. Are there different rules for the federal level as there are for the Commonwealth?
They typically are more restrictive. And when I was in the White House with President Clinton, he, under executive order, very dramatically increased those restrictions again while you were in public service and post-service restrictions. And I think that's the way to go. It's vital that we restore the public's confidence in their public officials. You know, this democracy is based on the idea and the need of active, engaged citizens. We turn our citizens off at our peril. We need people involved, believing, and getting good things done on behalf of those citizens.
We've got about a minute and a half left, but you've called the governor out directly on two things. One, about the voter ID law, why he shouldn't appeal it, and also to drop the fight on marriage equality. Talk about both those issues, if you would.
Well, listen, I think it's been transparent that this has been an initiative not to right any legitimate wrong in our voting process. You know, 3 years into this, and millions of our tax dollars spent, with the court repeatedly asking the governor to produce one instance of voter fraud that would justify the law. And the governor and his administration have not been able to find even one. At the same time, we know that seniors, the disabled, minorities are disadvantaged in terms of not having the appropriate identification. This has been an effort to suppress the vote, and what we need to do is move beyond it. Let everybody vote. I want everyone engaged.
Quickly on marriage equality.
Same thing. I mean, it's clearly unconstitutional, and millions of tax dollars now spent when we see jurisdiction after jurisdiction understanding it's unconstitutional. Let's join the 21st century. Let's show the world we're going to be a state that's forward-looking, inventing the future. Let's move.
Where should they go to learn more about your campaign, your website, if you would?
Thank you. My website, KatieMcGinty.com, and it's KatieMcGinty.com.
Secretary McGinty, thank you. Thanks for watching this edition of For the Record. Take care.